All right, welcome back, you guys. This is the second lesson in Unit 12. We are going to continue adding, except we're going to leave off the integers and now focus on decimals and fractions. We're still going to be using the same exact skills from the last lesson, except we're throwing in, like I said, fractions and decimals. So you need to remember those processes. How to add fractions. Remember, we need common denominators. We need to make sure we know how to make improper fractions. We also need to remember to simplify. And then also with decimals, the key here is making sure you line up those decimals. So let's get started, shall we? You don't need to write this down. It's not in your handout. It's just a review. We're going to be focusing on rational numbers. Remember, rational numbers are any number that can be written as a fraction of two integers. So your fractions, your decimals, it doesn't matter if they're positive or negative. So adding fractions. If you have mixed numbers, you need to make sure we write those mixed numbers as improper fractions. It's going to make things a lot easier for you. Make sure once you have your improper fractions that you find a common denominator. Most importantly, the least common denominator. It's going to save you from some simplifying toward the end. And then once you have your problem written with common denominators, you're going to follow the same rules that we used in the last lesson. So if your signs are the same, two positives or two negatives, you're going to just add those numbers together and keep the sign. If the signs are different, remember that's when we have to subtract and use the sign from the number that has the larger absolute value. If your answer is a fraction, make sure it is simplified and that you have the negative sign in front of the fraction. The negative signs always go in front of, not behind the fraction. All right, our first example is negative 5/6 plus a third. We need to start with a common denominator. Common denominator for 6 and 3 is 3. So is 6. Since my one fraction already has a 6 in the denominator, we're not going to have to change anything here. We're going to focus on that 1/3. We're going to convert 1/3 to 2/6 because 3 times 2 is 6, and whatever we do to the denominator, we must also do to the numerator. So let's rewrite that problem. We now have negative 5/6 plus 2/6, and all we need to focus on is the top part right here. Negative 5 plus 2. Make sure again that your negative sign is in the front. So if we have a negative and a positive, our signs are different. We're going to be subtracting these. 5 minus 2 is 3. And then I need to determine if that's going to be positive or negative. Well, the 5 is a stronger value, absolute value. And since that 5 is negative, my answer is also going to be negative. Here they've modeled it with a number line. So we've started at negative 5/6. This here takes us to negative 5/6. To that, we're adding a third, which is also, remember, 2/6. So we went 1 2/6 in the positive direction to land us at negative 3/6. And you might think that we're done, but we are not, because that is a fraction that needs to be simplified. We can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 3 to make that negative 1/2. Notice the negative sign here is in front of your numerator. Here it's in front of this whole fraction. Both of these are appropriate ways to write negative fractions, okay? Here we have a new problem, negative 2/5 plus negative 3/10. Remember, these parentheses are just to separate the addition sign from that negative sign. Now I'm already thinking about the fact that I have two negatives, a negative here, a negative there. So I'm already thinking that when I get my answer, it is definitely going to be a negative. My first step is to find a common denominator for 5 and 10. That, of course, is going to be 10. So 2/5, I'm going to have to double this. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 2 is 4. Of course, keeping that negative, we're not changing that. And then we simply have to add our numerators together. So negative 4/10 plus negative 3/10 we get a total of -7/10. Same process here, except we have a word problem. I'm going to solve it the exact same way though. The change in the value of Digimax stock last week was -3 1/4 points. This week, the change in stock's value was -1 2/3 points. Find the total change in value of Digimax stock over the last 2 weeks. So we're looking for a total. That tells me we are adding. Not only are we adding, we're adding two negative numbers. And just like in the last example, if the signs are the same, we're going to keep that. So I've got two negatives. My answer is also going to be negative. First, start by making these improper fractions. Remember, we multiply and then add. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13, keeping that negative. Denominator stays the same. And then we do it over here too. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5. So our new numerator is 5. Denominator stays the same. Don't forget your negative sign. Okay, if you leave that off, it's going to change everything. Now that we have improper fractions, we need to find common denominators for 4 and 3. Do you already know what it is? Are you thinking 12? Because that would be correct. So to change 4 into 12, we would multiply by 3. 4 times 3 is 12. 13 times 3 is 39. Do the same for the other fraction. 3 times 4 is 12. 5 times 4 is 20. Again, don't forget those negative signs. All right, so our new problem is negative. Oh, that's not supposed to be an equal sign, you guys. That's a typo. -39. This should be plus. It's the same key. Somebody forgot to hit shift. Sorry about that. -39 plus -20 is going to give us a -59 over 12. Do not leave your answer as an improper fraction. Improper means it's not the appropriate way to do that. 12 goes into 59 4 times. That would be 48 with 11 left over. This is going to stay a negative answer. So the stock changed by -4 11/12 points over the last 2 weeks. Last week's Janet's weight changed, -2 1/3 pounds, so she lost some weight. This week, her weight change was +1 1/5 pounds. Okay, so she gained some weight. Find the total change in Janet's weight over the past 2 weeks. We have a positive, we have a negative, so we're going to have to do things a little differently here. Start by writing your problem. -2/3 plus 1 1/5. Remember, we now have to make these improper. So 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7 over 3. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6 over 5. Keep that negative sign, right? Now we need a common denominator for 3 and 5. What's it going to be? 15, yep. 3 times 5 is 15. 7 times 5 is 35. 5 times 3 is 15. 6 times 3 is 18. So now remember our rules from the previous lesson. We have a positive and we have a negative. We have to subtract those and find the sign of the larger value. 35 is definitely bigger than 18, and that 35 is negative. So that tells us our answer is going to be negative. We would end up with a -17 over 15. However, this is an improper fraction, so when you convert it to a mixed number, you'll get -1 2/15 pounds. So even though she gained some weight back, she still is less weight than she started 2 weeks ago. All right, adding and adding positive and negative decimals. You guys, this is way easier than the fractions. You're going to follow the exact same rules from lesson 1. So if your signs are the same, just add those bad boys together and keep your sign. If they are different, subtract the two values and take the sign of the bigger number, okay? The most important thing here is that you line up those decimals. If you don't line up your decimals, your answer is going to be completely wrong. All right. We have two problems here. We're going to start with A. Negative 2 7/10 plus 3 8/10. We have a positive. We have a negative. So I know I'm going to have to subtract those. When I subtract them, I end up with 1 1/10. Look at these. Which one is a bigger number? 3 8/10 is a bigger number. It has the stronger value. It is positive. So my answer is going to be positive. If we were to model this on a number line, starting at 0, going down to negative 2.7, and then we're going to add to that 3 8/10. So we're going to move 3 8/10 units in the positive direction. And that's going to put us at 1 1/10. For B, look at this. We've got negative 1900ths plus negative 4/10. I've got two negative numbers. When we combine those, of course, we're going to get another negative number. So line up those decimals. Whole number, decimal, tenths, hundredths. I would even put a magic 0 here. Remember doing that way back at the beginning of the year? So we have two negative numbers. We're going to add those together. And of course, don't forget your negative sign. Okay, so our answer is going to be negative 5900ths. And this is what a model would look like on the number line. Going down to 1900ths and then down even further, another 4/10. Puts us at almost 6/10. We're at 5900ths, negative 5900ths. Okay, this is our last problem. Sorry about that glitch there. Negative 2 800ths plus negative 11 1/4. So here's the deal. I'm not going to walk you through this problem. I want you to solve this one on your handouts, all on your own. I'm going to be checking to make sure this answer is correct. Don't forget to line up your decimals. Okay, let's see what you got. Have at it. Ta-ta.